No soldier could quiet the Dragon Emperor's pain until a human maid sang her mother's melody. The great hall of Orathan shimmered like a furnace forged from dreams and dread. Gold scales lined the pillars, molten in the flickering torchlight, and the air rippled with the soft vibration of an unearthly breath. Soldiers stood in perfect rows, their silver armor trembling not from fear of battle, but from the tremor that pulsed beneath their boots. At the center, upon a dais of obsidian veined with amber fire, the Dragon Emperor slept, or rather convulsed, his vast body twisting like a storm contained within flesh. His claws raked shallow trenches into the stone floor. Each exhale rolled through the hall as a low, keening growl that made chandeliers quiver, casting sparks of gold across the gathered guard. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. Mira stood at the edge of the procession, hands folded around the hem of her plain linen dress, eyes darting between armored backs. Her place was not here. Maids did not enter the imperial hall during the Emperor's night watch. Yet the cry had gone out through the palace before dawn. The Emperor suffers again. And no priest, no healer, no battle-scarred soldier had found the courage to stand near his dreaming form since. She should have stayed hidden among the linen halls, where the smell of soap and bread softened the world. But something in the sound, a pain like thunder cracking open a heart, had drawn her here against reason. A voice cut through the trembling air. "Back! All of you back another pace." It was Captain Reynold, the oldest of the royal guard, his beard streaked with steel and his eyes red from too many sleepless nights. He stared at the Dragon Emperor, whose golden wings shifted like vast sails against the marble, each tremor stirring a gale through the chamber. "He dreams of the scorch again," Reynold murmured. "If he wakes too suddenly, even the walls will burn." He glanced down the line, and his eyes caught on Mira. His frown deepened. "Girl, you do not belong be—" But before he could finish, the Emperor groaned, the sound like mountains grinding together. The guards flinched, blades rattling in their sheaths. Heat flooded the room. Torches flared white, bending sideways in the gust of breath from the dragon's snout. Mira felt the air rush over her skin, alive, ancient, sorrowful. Her fear should have frozen her in place, but instead, she stepped forward. "He's hurting," she whispered. Reynold's hand shot out to stop her, but she moved faster than her fear allowed. "Please," she said. "If you strike him or shout, he'll only thrash more." The captain hesitated, torn between duty and disbelief. "He's not a man to soothe," he hissed. "He's the last Flameborn. His rage alone melted the siege of Thaler. What do you think your hands could do?" But Mira did not answer. She walked until her shoes touched the heat blooming from his scales. The Emperor's eyes remained closed, the golden lids trembling, the breath rattling like wind through broken glass. Every shudder spoke of agony. Mira knelt, the world filled with the scent of smoke and salt, like tears boiling away. Her fingers hovered above the creature's snout, afraid to touch. She could see her reflection in the scales, a tiny, trembling girl reflected 1,000 times over, haloed in gold. "My lady," whispered another soldier from behind, "come away before he wakes." But Mira only closed her eyes. She remembered a lullaby, soft and wordless, that her mother used to sing when storms battered the roof of their cottage, when thunder frightened her as a child. It had no real lyrics, only a rise and fall of hums that spoke of rain easing on stone, of warmth returning after loss. She began to hum it now, quietly at first, so low the guards thought it was the wind whistling through the vaulted ceiling. The dragon stirred, a tremor running down his neck. The flames in the braziers dimmed to a steady glow. Mira's heartbeat steadied with the rhythm of her melody. The sound wove between breaths, filling the hall not with power but with peace. For a moment, one trembling, disbelieving moment, the Emperor's claws loosened, and the grinding sound ceased. Captain Reynold took a half-step forward, mouth open, eyes wide as the thunder of the dragon's breathing softened. He whispered, "By the pyre gods." His soldiers watched, frozen. The Emperor exhaled through his nostrils. The gust was warm but no longer scorching. Mira's voice grew stronger, trembling less. The lullaby's simple notes echoed against gilded walls, their innocence filling a space that had forgotten gentleness for centuries. She did not dare open her eyes to see what they witnessed, the Emperor's brow unknitting, the molten glow in his throat fading to embers. When her song faltered, a sigh rolled from the dragon, a sound so immense yet fragile that every man in the hall dropped to one knee. Mira finally looked up. His vast eye, a sun trapped in amber, opened just enough to regard her. She saw pain there, yes, but also memory, a reflection of something beyond war. He blinked once, slow as the turning of seasons, and then his voice filled the chamber, not with thunder, but with words shaped from breath and sorrow. "You, Sang?" The voice shook dust from the rafters, deep and resonant, but gentle now, like the world's heart speaking through stone. Mira bowed her head. "Forgive me, my lord. I meant no—" "No," he interrupted, the single word resonating with heat and gratitude. "You meant peace." His gaze drifted past her to the guards. "They bring blades to silence my dreams, but you bring sound." His head lowered slightly, the enormous weight of it stirring a gust that lifted her hair. "Who taught you that song?" "My mother," Mira whispered. "She sang it when the sky was angry, to tell me it would pass." The dragon's eye flickered brighter as though kindled by a distant sun. "She was wise," he murmured. "For even the sky must rest." He drew a breath that shook the hall and released it with care, as if afraid to break her. "The pain fades, little one. Stay." Then his lids closed again, and for the first time in living memory, the Dragon Emperor slept without flame or fury. The guards dared to breathe again. Some crossed themselves in reverence. Others simply wept. Captain Reynold approached slowly, his armor whispering with each step. "You've done what no sword or spell could, girl," he said, his voice thick. "He hasn't rested in years." Mira rose shakily, unsure whether to feel pride or terror. "I just sang," she said. Reynold nodded, his face lined with awe. "Sometimes that is all the gods ever wanted of us." But as dawn light spilled through the high windows, glinting off scales and steel, Mira noticed something new. The gold along the dragon's chest shimmered faintly with veins of crimson pulsing like blood. Her song had soothed his nightmare, yes, but it had also awakened something deeper. The Emperor's breathing changed, quieter but more human, as though the melody had reached beyond pain into memory itself. Reynold saw her expression and frowned. "What is it?" She hesitated. "He's dreaming again, but differently. Listen." The hall fell silent. Beneath the steady rhythm of his breath, they could all hear it, a low melodic vibration echoing her tune. The dragon was humming in his sleep. Reynold crossed his arms, half smiling in disbelief. "You've given him peace and perhaps a curse. For now he dreams as we do." That night the news spread across Orathen like wind through banners. The Emperor slept, the fires dimmed, and the castle no longer trembled. In the servants' quarters, Mira sat alone, hands clasped tight around her apron, replaying the sight of that golden eye. She wondered if it had truly looked at her or merely through her, seeing someone long lost. She feared she had broken some sacred boundary, yet deep within, she felt the echo of his gratitude, silent, vast, and heavy as the sunrise. When she finally drifted to sleep, she dreamed of a field of glass where a dragon and a woman walked side by side, their shadows touching. The song still lingered between them like breath. Outside her window, unseen beneath the moonlight, the Emperor stirred once more. Smoke curled from his nostrils, soft and wistful, shaping itself into a single word carried on the wind. Mira. The dawn that followed was softer than any Orathen had seen in decades. The first light spilled through the high spires of the palace, catching on the gilded roofs and scattering like liquid fire across the misty courtyards. Within the great hall the torches had burned down to quiet embers, and for once the air was cool enough that soldiers no longer wiped sweat from their brows. The Dragon Emperor still slept. His wings were folded neatly, his head resting upon one great claw, and his tail coiled with a calm rhythm that matched the slow beating of his colossal heart. The tremors that had haunted the palace through so many years were gone. Only the hush of awe remained, a silence so complete that it felt sacred. Mira stood where she had fallen asleep hours earlier, slumped against a marble pillar, her hands still clasped as though in prayer. Captain Reynold had ordered the guards to leave her undisturbed. He watched her now from the base of the dais, his mind turning over what had happened again and again. He had seen dragons die and kings weep, but never this. Never a beast of godlike wrath calmed by a voice softer than a breeze. Part of him wanted to believe it was sorcery, some forgotten charm disguised as song, but when he'd heard the melody, it had carried no spellcraft, only warmth. Still, the old soldier knew miracles often carried their own cost, and he feared what balance might demand for peace, such as this. When Mira awoke, it was to the smell of cooled scales and old stone. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment she thought she was still dreaming. The Dragon Emperor lay only a few paces away, massive and unmoving, his chest rising with the quiet rhythm of sleep. She rose, her limbs trembling, and brushed dust from her dress. "He's still resting," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. Reynold nodded. "He has not stirred since your song ended. You must have done more than soothe him. You broke the fever of his dreams." His words carried both gratitude and uncertainty, as though he feared naming a blessing too loudly might make it vanish. Mira approached the Emperor again, slower this time, reverent. She placed a hand on the obsidian floor. It was warm, but no longer searing. "I didn't mean to do anything," she said. "It just felt wrong to let him hurt." Reynold gave a short, rough laugh, the kind that hides emotion. Intent seldom matters when the gods choose their instruments. He gestured toward the tall doors. "The council will summon you soon. They'll want to know what happened." Mira's stomach tightened. "The council?" "Aye," Reynold said. "You calmed their emperor. Half will want to thank you. The other half will want to understand, perhaps even fear, how." His expression softened as he saw her confusion. "Keep your humility, girl. It may save you when praise turns to suspicion." He left then, boots echoing across the marble, leaving her alone with the sleeping Titan. Mira sank to her knees, studying the golden scales nearest to her. In daylight she saw they weren't perfect. Beneath the sheen lay faint scars, cracks repaired by molten light that pulsed faintly, like veins of living metal. She reached out and touched one edge gently. It was smoother than glass, but alive beneath her fingers, trembling with faint heat. "What do you dream now?" she murmured. The Emperor exhaled, a sound that stirred her hair but no longer frightened her. For a moment, she thought she heard the echo of her lullaby deep within that breath, soft, like an ember, remembering flame. By midday, the palace was alive with whispers. Courtiers in crimson robes gathered near balconies, speaking in hurried tones, while priests of the eternal pyre chanted blessings for protection. None dared enter the great hall without the captain's word. Reynold met with the High Consul, his rough hands folded as he recounted the night's miracle. The consul's jeweled brow furrowed. "A maid's song healed the Emperor's madness," he said, incredulous. "Or delayed it." Reynold's jaw clenched. "He sleeps, my lord. That's more than any of your scholars managed in 5 years. 5 years of agony," the consul mused. "If she has broken it, we owe her honor. If she has bound him in another spell, we owe her judgment." Reynold bristled. "She's no witch. I saw no sigils, no light, only her courage." But the consul's gaze drifted toward the hall's sealed doors. "Courage changes little when power stirs old things, Captain. We must know what truly touched his dreams." Mira was summoned before sunset. Servants guided her through halls that had once been forbidden to her, their marble floors gleaming like frozen fire. She walked barefoot, her shoes abandoned in the hall after her long vigil. When she entered the council chamber, a dozen nobles turned as one, their robes whispering like restless flames. At the far end sat the consul, his hands adorned with rings that glittered like small suns. "Mira of the lower wing," he said, "you stand before the Council of Orothan to speak of what transpired last night." His voice was courteous but edged. "Tell us what you did." She bowed clumsily. "I sang, my lord." "Sang," the consul repeated, exchanging glances with his peers. "And what words?" "None," she said. "It was a lullaby, my mother's tune." One of the scholars leaned forward, quill scratching over parchment. "You mean to say no invocation, no relic, no gesture of power?" "Only song," she said quietly. The chamber fell silent except for the scratching of ink. "And why did you enter the hall, Maid?" the consul pressed. "No summons was issued for your kind." Mira hesitated. "Because he cried," she said at last. "Not like a beast, but like someone lost. I couldn't ignore it." Murmurs rippled across the chamber. The consul's eyes narrowed, not cruelly, but searching. "You pitied him?" "No," she said. I understood him. That answer drew a sharper silence. Reynolds, standing behind her, saw the shift in the council's expressions, some softening, others hardening with unease. The consul leaned back. The Emperor has known no understanding since he took flame into mortal form. Perhaps your empathy reached what faith could not. His tone was thoughtful now, almost admiring. Still, empathy alone does not quell the nightmares of gods. Something passed between you and him, girl. Something that must be understood. Mira's hands clenched in her lap. If it must be known, she said softly, then ask him when he wakes. The words, innocent as they sounded, sent a ripple of astonishment through the chamber. To speak so plainly of the Emperor, as if he were merely a man, bordered on blasphemy. But before any noble could rebuke her, a tremor shook the floor. Distant, deep like a mountain stirring. Dust drifted from the painted ceiling. Gasps filled the chamber. He wakes, Reynolds whispered. The consul stood abruptly. To the hall? Guards surged toward the great doors, and Mira was swept along in their tide, heart hammering as she crossed the long corridor once more. The sight that met them stole every breath. The Dragon Emperor was no longer lying still. His eyes glowed like sunrise, and when he raised his head, golden motes drifted from his scales like falling stars. Yet there was no fury in his gaze. Instead, he regarded the gathering with an almost human clarity. Too many voices, he said softly, and though his words rumbled like thunder, they carried weariness, not wrath. Too much fear. The nobles bowed so low their foreheads touched the floor. Mira alone remained standing, frozen between awe and concern. His eyes found her first. You returned, he said, his tone almost gentle. Did I ask you to? You said to stay, she answered. The corners of his mouth, vast, scaled and solemn, lifted just slightly. Then you obeyed. Reynolds knelt beside her. My Emperor, the council wishes to understand. They wish to bind, the dragon interrupted, gaze sweeping the trembling nobles. Always they seek to name what they cannot hold. But not you, little one. His focus returned to Mira. You sang not to control, but to comfort. That is the power they have forgotten. His wings shifted, their motion stirring warm gusts that carried the scent of old flame and new rain. Tell me, what is your name again? Mira, she said. Mira, he repeated, tasting the syllables as though they were relics of another age. You have given me silence where pain once ruled. For that I owe a debt. The consul found his courage then. Majesty, he said carefully, if her song eased you, perhaps it may be used again to heal others of your kind. The dragon's gaze flickered, sharp as sunlight off a blade. You would turn her compassion into craft? The nobles fell silent under the weight of his words. Her voice is not yours to command. He lowered his head until the heat of his breath ruffled Mira's hair. Nor mine, but if she would share it willingly, then let her choose. Mira swallowed, caught between fear and the strange warmth of being seen. I would sing again if it helps, she said. The dragon's eyes softened. Then you already understand more than your kings. When he turned his gaze outward, the golden light spilling from him touched every corner of the hall. Hear me, he said to the nobles. The scorch within me is quiet for now. But it will rise again, unless the world learns the song that calms not beasts, but hearts. Teach your people to remember gentleness. Teach them that power without mercy is only torment. Then, with a slow exhale, he settled once more, the fire dimming beneath his scales. Leave me now. All but her. Reluctantly, the hall emptied. Reynolds hesitated, then bowed to Mira. I'll be right outside, he murmured. When the doors closed, silence returned, thick, almost tender. Mira stepped closer. You remember what you dreamt? She asked. The dragon's eye opened halfway, its glow softer now. Fragments, he said. A woman's voice, the scent of rain, a promise broken long ago. I once walked as flesh, Mira, before flame bound me to this throne. Your song reminded me of that heartbeat. He paused, the air trembling with the gravity of memory. For your mother's melody carries something older than human or dragon. Where did she learn it? Mira shook her head. She never said, only that her mother sang it before her. The dragon's gaze deepened. Then the thread runs farther than you know. Perhaps the song was never meant for children alone, but for those who have forgotten peace. He lowered his head until one great eye met her at level. Would you return tomorrow, Mira of the lower wing? She hesitated. If I'm allowed. You are summoned, he said simply, and a smile, small, impossibly human, touched his voice. That night, the palace did not sleep easily. Whispers of prophecy wound through corridors like smoke, that the maid carried the voice of the first dawn, that she could soothe gods and monsters alike. Mira returned to her quarters, feeling the weight of their stares, but also something new stirring inside her, a quiet courage that felt older than fear. As she lay in bed, she heard faint music echoing through the stone, not her own song but the dragon's hum, rising and falling in rhythm with the stars. She closed her eyes and smiled, unaware that beyond the mountains, fires long extinguished began to glow once more, and in the depths of his dreaming, the Dragon Emperor whispered her melody into the heart of the world, where it began to awaken things both wondrous and unknown. The next dawn came with thunder, not of war but of awakening. From the highest towers of Orathan to the valleys of the silver rivers below, the kingdom stirred with stories too miraculous to contain. Farmers on distant hills spoke of strange warmth in the wind. The old who had forgotten laughter found themselves humming melodies without knowing why. In the capital, the Dragon Emperor slept still, his breath slow even, yet every pulse of his vast heart resonated faintly through the stone foundations of the city. It was said the walls themselves glowed at night, whispering the name Mira. The Emperor's pain had become the people's wonder, and wonder has a way of reshaping faith faster than decrees ever could. Mira had not left the palace since that first night. The council forbade her to return to the servant quarters, insisting she remain near the throne under guard. Officially, it was for her protection. Unofficially, they feared losing the girl who held the Emperor's calm in her hands. She lived now in a small chamber near the Hall of Flame, its walls lined with old banners scorched by forgotten battles. At dawn, she would kneel beside the resting dragon and sing softly, not to command him but to remind him of peace. Each morning his scales brightened and his breath grew steadier, though she noticed the color shifting subtly, gold giving way to the deep bronze of cooling fire. The transformation fascinated and frightened her alike. Something was changing in him, something that seemed tied to her song. Captain Reynold visited often, bringing food and word from the outside. His gruffness had softened since the miracle, though he hid it beneath habit. "You're becoming legend faster than I can polish my armor," he told her one morning, leaning on his spear. "The people think your song is holy. The priests are already arguing over which god you serve." Mira smiled faintly. "I serve none. I only sang because he hurt." Reynold chuckled. "That, child, is why they'll call you a saint." He looked toward the slumbering emperor, whose tail twitched faintly in dream. "And he speaks your name even asleep. You've done more than soothe him. You've changed him." Mira folded her hands, uneasy. "Is that a good thing?" Reynold hesitated, then sighed. "The world will decide that, not us." Outside the hall, the kingdom was shifting in rhythm with the dragon's healing. Fires that once needed sacred oil to burn now kindled on their own, gentle and perpetual. The river steam that powered the lower city ran warmer than usual, filling the air with mist that carried faint echoes of song. The scholars called it the lullaby resonance, the priests called it the breath of mercy, and the people simply called it hope. Yet not all welcome change. Among the council, whispers turned sharp. "A servant has undone what gods could not," one noble hissed behind closed doors. "If she commands his dreams, she commands us all." Another added, "Then let her sing under watch." A voice that calms dragons could awaken worse things if twisted. Fear, as ever, followed awe like shadow chasing light. That evening, Mira was summoned again before the consul. The chamber felt colder this time, though torches burned bright. The consul's expression was unreadable. "Mira of the lower wing," he began, "you have done what none could. But power, whether born of faith or chance, must be understood before it can be trusted. His Majesty calls you by name. He listens to none else. What if in soothing him, you awaken something else within him?" Mira met his gaze steadily. "Then I will sing again," she said. The simplicity of it disarmed him for a moment. You speak as though song is shield enough against gods. It's all I have, she replied. Silence followed, broken only by the sound of parchment crackling in the fire. Finally, the consul said, "Very well. But if his dreams grow darker, you will tell us." She nodded. "If he lets me near them, I will." That night, Mira returned to the emperor's side. The hall was lit only by moonlight, which slid across his scales in rivers of silver. She sat cross-legged on the floor and waited. Minutes stretched into hours before his vast eyelid lifted. "You're late," he murmured, his voice rolling like distant thunder softened by cloud. "I was summoned," she said. "They worry for you." "They fear you," he corrected gently. "Fear often wears the mask of worry." His eyes narrowed, not in anger but reflection. "Once, when I was mortal, I too feared what I could not control. It cost me my heart." Mira tilted her head. "You were human?" His chest rumbled with quiet laughter. "In a way. The flame chose me long ago. It burned away my flesh, left only what could bear eternity. But the dreams remained human. That is the pain you soothed." She listened, captivated. "And now?" she asked. "Now," he said slowly, "I feel warmth I thought lost. Your melody wakes memories of rain and soil, of frailty. It reminds me that power was never meant to silence sorrow, but to share it." His words hung heavy in the still air. Then his gaze softened. "Sing, Mira. Let me remember again." She began the lullaby, softer than before, her voice trembling through the high arches. This time the music did not make him sleep. Instead, he kept his eyes half open, watching her with something like wonder. The flames along the hall dimmed, and the air turned cool, carrying the scent of wet earth. When her song faded, he whispered, "That melody carries more than your mother's love. It carries history. I must find where it began." The next morning, Reynold found her by the window, staring toward the horizon. "You look as though you've seen the end of the world," he said. "Maybe the beginning," she answered softly. She told him of the Emperor's words. Reynold frowned. "If he starts seeking the past, the Council will panic. They prefer gods that sleep." Mira's brow furrowed. "Should I stop him?" "You?" Reynold chuckled grimly. "You couldn't stop him if you sang the stars themselves still. Just remind him of gentleness, girl. That's the only leash the mighty ever understand." 3 nights later, the Emperor summoned both her and the captain. The hall blazed brighter than before. He stood this time towering over them, wings half-furled, each scale alive with molten light. "The pain returns," he said, his voice strained. "But it is different now. Not rage, remembrance." He looked down at Mira. "Your song has unlocked doors I sealed when I took the crown. Scifi faces, fields, a name I once carried." His breath hitched, smoke curling from his nostrils. "I was called Delian once. Before fire, before conquest." Mira stepped closer without fear. "Do you wish to remember him?" "I do not know," he said, and the honesty in that admission felt heavier than stone. "For memory is pain reborn." She reached out, laying her hand against a single scale near his foreleg. "Then let it be shared." He closed his eyes and the world shifted. Mira gasped as the hall melted away. She was standing in a field beneath 2 suns, the air shimmering with heat. Before her stood Delion, not dragon but man, armored in bronze, his eyes fierce yet kind. She saw war around him, flames devouring cities, and heard the cries of those he had tried to save. Then came the moment he offered himself to the flame, a pact to become the guardian of realms, never again to feel human grief. But even the divine cannot burn away the soul. The vision faded, and she stumbled back into the hall, tears on her cheeks. The Emperor bowed his head. "You saw it too," he said. "Then the bond is real." Reynold stood speechless. "What in the gods' names just happened?" Mira wiped her eyes. "They shared his memory." "And survived it," Delion murmured, "because you were there." He turned his gaze to the captain. "You see now why your kind feared my dreams? They hold not madness, but truth." Reynold nodded slowly, awed despite himself. "Then the world has been worshipping your suffering." The dragon smiled sadly. "As it ever does." He looked to Mira again. "If my pain becomes bridge instead of fire, then perhaps humanity's voice will guide flame to mercy." In the days that followed, Delion's form began to change. His wings folded tighter, his size diminished, scales darkening to bronze streaked with veins of red. He was still vast, still magnificent, but there was something undeniably mortal about him now, an echo of the man he had been. The council watched with mixed dread and fascination. The priest declared it a metamorphosis of divine will. Mira knew better. It was the song's doing, her doing, and his choice to listen. She continued to visit, continued to sing, though sometimes she found herself humming new verses without knowing where they came from. The emperor listened, learning them as if they were parts of himself he had forgotten. One evening, as twilight painted the horizon, he spoke quietly. "When I burn again, and I will, the world must remember not my fire but your voice. Promise me, Mira." She met his glowing eyes. "I promise." "Good," he said, lowering his head. "Then even if I fade, the melody will remain. And perhaps in another age, another child will sing peace to power again." His breath washed over her, warm and fragrant with embers. She smiled sadly. "You talk as if goodbye. Change always is," he said. "But it is also beginning." Outside, thunder rolled. The air grew heavy, charged. Across Orathan, every hearth flared suddenly, every flame turning white for one brief heartbeat before settling back to gold. The priests cried omen. The scholars cried miracle. Mira only felt the pulse of the song in her chest, resonating with something vast and wordless. When she returned to the hall, she found Dalian gazing at the horizon through the shattered dome. "It begins," he said. "The flame stirs beyond the mountains. Others like me awaken." His gaze fell to her. "They will not understand peace. They will come seeking war." Her heart clenched. "Then I'll sing for them too." He laughed softly, the sound deep and bittersweet. "You truly are human, and that is your greatest weapon." Night fell like a curtain of stars. The palace trembled faintly as the first echoes of distant wings filled the sky. Dragons long thought extinct answering some ancient call. Mira stood beside the emperor, small yet unflinching. "You'll face them?" she asked. "Not as emperor," he said, "but as Dalian, the man who forgot mercy until a maid reminded him." He turned, his vast eye gleaming with something fierce and tender. "When they arrive, do not run, sing, even if your voice breaks." She nodded, heart racing. "I will." He lowered his head until his brow touched the marble, a bow from a god to a girl. "Then the world may yet survive its awakening." The sky above Orathan split with the sound of wings like thunder made flesh. Clouds shuddered apart as shapes vast and gleaming descended through the dawn, their bodies glinting in bronze, crimson, and silver flame. Dragons, real, terrible, beautiful, swept in from horizons unseen for centuries, drawn by something older than war, older even than gods. From the palace courtyard, Mira watched their shadows roll over towers and battlements, each roar echoing through her bones. The people below screamed or prayed. Soldiers raised weapons they knew would do nothing. Only Dalian remained calm, his great body coiled upon the obsidian dais, eyes alight with something between pride and sorrow. "They have awakened," he said quietly. "And they come not for conquest but for remembrance." Mira's voice trembled. "They heard your dreams?" Dalian inclined his head. "They heard your song." The words fell like stones into her chest. He turned his gaze toward the horizon, where a scarlet dragon led the flight, wings cutting arcs of fire through the pale sky. "That one was my brother once, before the flame devoured our names. He believes peace is a lie the weak tell themselves to survive. He will test your melody, child." Mira swallowed hard. "Then I'll sing louder." His chuckle rumbled softly. "Bravery is a fine armor, but it weighs little against flame. Remember, your voice reaches where blades cannot. Use it not to fight but to remind." Then his eyes hardened, molten gold flaring deep within. "Still, I will not let them harm you." The dragons circled above the city, their presence shaking every tower and heart below. Soldiers lined the walls, shields trembling, though Captain Reynold barked orders with iron steadiness. "Hold the line! You'll not raise steel unless I command it." His gaze flicked to the palace roof, where Mira stood beside the emperor. She looked impossibly small against that vast burning sky, yet her calm steadiness unnerved him more than the storm itself. He remembered her words from that first night. "He's hurting," and realized they might now apply to the world entire. The lead dragon roared then, a sound that cracked tiles and silenced all other noise. When he spoke, his voice rolled across the city like an avalanche. "Dalian oath-broken, you wake to weakness, not wisdom. Has fire failed you so deeply that you kneel to a mortal child?" The air quaked as Dalian rose, spreading his wings wide enough to blot out half the sun. His reply was low but carried farther than any shout. I kneel to memory, not to flesh. This child holds what we lost. The scarlet dragon, vast and cruelly elegant, laughed, a sound like blades drawn across stone. Song cannot mend what eternity has burned away. Then listen before you judge, Delian said, and his tail lashed once, sending a gust of heat through the plaza. He turned to Mira. Sing for them as you did for me. Her knees nearly buckled under the weight of his faith. She had sung before one dragon in darkness. Now she faced a sky full of them in light. She closed her eyes. The memory of her mother's voice steadied her heart, the rhythm of rain on rooftops, the hush that follows storm. Her breath trembled once, then steadied. The first note rose thin and pure, carried on the wind like a feather of sound. It was fragile compared to the roaring sky, yet it lingered, echoing against stone and flame alike. The dragons faltered mid-flight, wings stuttering as if struck by invisible gravity. The melody swelled, no longer small. The palace walls caught it, magnified it, and the whole city became its echo chamber. Mira's song rose, threading through the clouds, weaving harmony where there had been only noise. Delian closed his eyes, letting it wash through him. He could feel it binding the cracks within his spirit, cooling the remnants of rage. The scarlet dragon roared again, but this time it was not fury. It was confusion. What is this? He thundered. Why does the flame recoil? His wings faltered. Delian's voice followed, calm yet commanding. It recoils from peace because it remembers it was born of love, not war. The others hovered uncertain, vast forms shivering in the light of dawn. Mira's melody shifted, softening, beckoning. The sound carried no dominance, only invitation. One by one the dragon's roars fell silent, replaced by low trembling chords of breath, like the world itself humming along. The scarlet one descended, landing with a quake that split marble steps. His eyes blazed molten crimson as he lowered his head toward the girl. You dare still the flame's hunger? He growled. The heat rolling from him singed the air. Mira's throat trembled, but she did not step back. No, she said softly. I only remind it it's not alone. The dragon flinched, confusion flickering across his ancient face. Alone? She nodded. You all burned for so long you forgot the sound of gentleness. Fire is lonely when it consumes everything it touches. He stared at her, the rage in his chest flickering, uncertain. Delian stepped closer, his shadow engulfing them both. Do you hear it, brother? The truth even gods forgot. Compassion does not extinguish fire, it gives it purpose. The scarlet dragon's head lowered further until his breath ruffled Mira's hair. Your voice carries memory I cannot name, he whispered, trembling. Who are you, child? Mira smiled faintly. Just someone who listened. His massive form shuddered once, and then, slowly, impossibly, he bowed. The watching city gasped as centuries of fear bent knee before a human maid. One by one the others followed, folding their wings, lowering their heads in silence. The song faded into the still air, leaving only the sound of their hearts beating in strange harmony. When it ended, Delian spoke quietly. The world breathes again, but peace, even miraculous, seldom lasts without test. From the horizon came another sound, a keening shriek unlike the dragon's voices, colder, hollow. The light dimmed as a shadow crossed the sun. Delian stiffened, eyes narrowing. That is no kin of flame, he murmured. A great shape emerged from the clouds, vast as night and twice as silent. A serpent of smoke and iron, scales dull and lifeless. The scarlet dragon hissed, the Ashen One. He followed the flame's end into darkness. He devours warmth itself. The creature coiled above them, its voice a whisper that cracked the air. Peace, it hissed, is death. Let the flames sleep forever. The dragons roared as one, but their fire died mid-air, sucked into the serpent's shadow. Even Delian staggered, his light dimming. Mira felt her song falter as cold seeped into her bones. The air tasted of ash and despair. Delian turned to her, voice strained. He feeds on memory. If he devours my dreams, all that we have mended will fade. Mira's pulse pounded. Then I'll sing again. No, he said sharply. This is not pain you can soothe, it is void. It will unmake your heart. She shook her head. Maybe. But if silence wins, there'll be no one left to sing at all. She stepped forward, the wind nearly tearing her hair free, and lifted her chin toward the shadow. The serpent's eyes, vast and pitiless, fixed upon her. A mortal voice, it sneered. Dares defy ending? She drew breath. feeling warmth bloom in her chest, not hers but borrowed, shared from every heart her song had touched. She began to hum. The first note shivered, weak. The serpent laughed, a sound that made stone weep. But the next note came stronger, and another after that until the air vibrated with fragile defiance. Dalian's wings flared, catching the rhythm, amplifying it into a resonance of light. The dragons around him joined in, not with words but with the low harmonics of their breath, weaving a symphony of flame and voice. The serpent screamed as light split the darkness. Mira's melody climbed higher, merging with the heartbeat of the world itself. Her voice cracked once, but Dalian's roar filled the space, and together they turned the very air to fire. The serpent writhed, its form unraveling like smoke torn apart by sunrise. When silence returned, it was vast and sacred. The sky cleared, the clouds dissolving into gold. Mira collapsed breathless, her voice spent. Dalian caught her gently between his claws, lowering her to the marble floor. "You did it," he said, his voice soft as a sigh. She smiled faintly, eyes fluttering. "We did." He looked up at the sky where the serpent had vanished. "No," he said. "You reminded the flame why it burns." The other dragons bowed their heads, their bodies shimmering with renewed light. The Scarlet One spoke quietly, reverent. "A mortal taught gods the shape of peace." As the sun rose, Dalian looked down at Mira. Her breathing was shallow, her skin pale. "You gave too much," he whispered. "Your voice is fading." She blinked, weakly smiling. "Then you'll have to remember it for me." His throat tightened, smoke curling with grief. "I will." He lowered his head until his brow touched her chest, feeling the faint beat of her heart. "Rest, little one. Let the world carry your melody." She closed her eyes, the corners of her lips curving. "It already does." Then her body went still, the last note of her song lingering in the air like dawn itself. For a long time, none moved. Even the wind seemed to bow. Finally, Dalian rose, his eyes burning with soft fire. "Her song will not fade," he declared. "It will live in the breath of every flame, in every heartbeat that remembers mercy." He spread his wings, their light casting halos across the city. This is her kingdom now. The dragons answered with a unified roar that shook the heavens, not in fury but in tribute. Far below, the people of Orathan knelt, tears shining in the firelight. They had seen gods tremble before a human voice, and learned that gentleness could command the cosmos. That night, Dalian stood atop the highest spire, watching the stars. Each one flickered faintly to the rhythm of the lullaby he now hummed under his breath. His vast form shimmered, the fire within dimming to steady ember. The other dragons took to the skies again, spreading across the world to carry the melody to lands beyond sight. Yet Dalian remained guardian once more, but now of peace, not conquest. In the quiet that followed, he whispered to the wind, "Sleep well. Mira of the lower wing, the world remembers." And somewhere deep in the stillness of the earth, faint and eternal, the echo of her song answered back. Centuries passed, though to the stones of Orathan it felt only like a breath. The city rebuilt itself not in conquest, but in harmony. Its towers crowned with gardens, its streets alive with music that flowed like wind through memory. Fires no longer burned for war. They glowed with purpose, warm and patient, symbols of the peace one song had kindled. The people still told the story of the maid who sang to a dragon, though with each generation her name softened, becoming legend, then prayer, then melody. They called it the lullaby of the flame, sung to soothe newborns and dying kings alike. The melody was older than grief and stronger than fear, and none who heard it doubted that somewhere the dragon emperor still listened. On the highest spire of the palace, Dalian remained, though time had worked its quiet miracles upon him. His wings had dimmed to bronze-veined stone. His scales shimmered faintly, not with heat but with memory. He no longer needed to guard or command. Instead, he kept watch, eyes ever half closed as if still dreaming the world awake. When storms rolled in from the mountains, he would hum softly and the clouds would part. When the people sang in the courtyards below, he would bow his head to listen. To those who dared climb the 1,000 steps to his perch, he offered only gentle wisdom. "Flame obeys the heart that remembers mercy," he would tell them. Few understood, but all left changed. Among those pilgrims was a young girl named Lyra, small and curious, with eyes like riverlight. She came not from the city, but from the low valleys, where her grandmother had taught her an old tune by the fireside. They say it was born from a human voice that calmed the sky, her grandmother had whispered. Sing it when the world feels too heavy. Lyra had done so often, humming the melody when storms frightened her, though she never knew it was the same song that had once tamed a god. One morning, she climbed the long stair to the spire, barefoot and determined, clutching a single white blossom in her hand. When she reached the top, she found Dalian still as a mountain, his great eyes closed, his breath slow but steady. She gasped softly. "You're real." Dalian's eyes opened, molten gold flickering faintly within. "So are you," he said, his voice deep yet kind. "Few climb so high for simple truths." Lyra bowed shyly. "I brought you a flower." He lowered his massive head, the heat of his breath rustling her hair as he gazed at the small bloom cupped in her palms. "Why?" he asked. "Because the stories said you miss her." His chest stilled for a moment, a sound like a sigh escaping him. "I do," he murmured. "And you bring me what grows in her absence. Tell me, child, do you know the song she sang?" Lyra nodded, smiling. "Everyone does, but I know it different. Grandmother said it's not about sleep. It's about remembering." Dalian's eyes softened. "She was wiser than most kings. Will you sing it for me?" he asked. The girl hesitated, then began, her small voice carrying into the wind. It was the same melody, though lighter now, brighter, like dawn after endless dusk. Dalian closed his eyes as it washed through him, every note unlocking echoes long buried. He saw Mira's face again. Not the maid, not the savior, but the woman who had knelt without fear before a monster and found a heart beneath flame. When the song ended, he spoke quietly. "She sang once to end my pain. Now her song endures to heal the world. Tell me, child, what do they call the melody where you live?" Lyra thought for a moment. "The mother's tune. They say it keeps away nightmares." Dalian smiled faintly. "So it still does." Days passed and Lyra returned often, bringing news of the valleys, the blooming fields, the new songs children had woven around the old one. Each time she came, Dalian would ask her to sing, and the city below would pause to listen, for when her voice rose, the air grew warm and the sky shone clearer. Some said the girl's song could heal failing crops. Others swore it eased grief. In truth, it was not magic, but memory made alive. The melody had become the language of peace itself, passed through generations without crown or creed. Yet as joy spread, so too did longing. Dalian felt it stirring again, the ache that had once been his prison. He knew the flame still lived beneath his scales, quiet but waiting. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the horizon, Dalian stirred from his long stillness. Lyra stood beside him, her flower wreath in hand. "You're sad," she said. He nodded slowly. "Not sad, full. The song has done what I could not. It taught the world gentleness, but the flame calls to sleep once more. My watch ends soon," she frowned. "You mean you're going away?" "Not away," he said softly. "Home. Fire cannot linger forever without consuming. I have stayed only because her melody held me between life and legend." His eyes shone brighter, tears like molten gems. "But I am tired, little one. Even gods grow weary of waiting." Lyra clutched his claw. "Then take me with you," he smiled sadly. "Where I go you already are." He lowered his vast head, pressing his brow to hers. "Carry her song," he whispered. "Teach it without fear. One day the world will need it again." She nodded, tears spilling freely. "I promise." His breath warmed the air until the flowers around the spire began to glow. "Then you will do what even I could not," he said. "You will keep the flame gentle." With that, he rose to his full height, wings unfurling one last time. The entire city saw it, saw the Dragon Emperor stretch his ancient form against the sunset, his scales burning brighter than the heavens. He looked down upon Orathan and spoke his final words. "Sleep well, my children. You have learned the melody of mercy." Then his wings caught the wind and his body became light. The air shimmered as if a star had descended, then rose again, scattering embers across the world. When the glow faded, only stone remained. His body crystallized into a monument that crowned the palace forever. The people wept, but Lyra only stood silent, watching the last sparks drift upward. One ember landed on her hand, cool and faintly humming. She held it close to her heart, and in that moment she knew the song was not ending. It was beginning again in her. In one such city of steel and glass centuries later, a young engineer named Aaliyah sat alone in her workshop. Outside, sirens wailed. The world was at war again, this time with no dragons to blame. She rubbed her temples, staring at the glowing core of a machine she'd built, a weapon meant to harness pure plasma. It throbbed with light like a living heart. "It's too much," she murmured. "It'll burn everything." Her hands trembled. Somewhere deep inside she felt a pull, an echo she couldn't name. She hummed without thinking, a melody so old it seemed to hum back. The machine's light softened, stabilizing. The alarms fell silent. Halia froze, breath-catching. "What was that?" she whispered. The tune lingered, faint but familiar, like a memory from a dream she had never lived. Across the world, sensors registered a pulse that no scientist could explain, a harmonic resonance rippling through circuits and atmosphere alike. Crops revived in scorched lands. Storm systems dissipated. In remote monasteries, monks awoke from meditation humming the same tune. And in the ruins of Orathan, beneath Dalian's stone wings, the old embers stirred once more. Light flared briefly in his crystal heart, as if recognizing the melody's return. The air shimmered, carrying a whisper only the wind could hear. The song continues. Back in her lab, Aaliyah stared at the stabilized core, realization dawning. "It's not just sound," she murmured. "It's balance." She spent nights studying the frequencies, discovering patterns that aligned with biological harmony, with the very rhythm of life itself. What she did not know, what none remembered, was that she was singing Mira's lullaby reborn through time, her voice carrying the same human defiance and tenderness that had once calmed a god. When her research reached the global stage, leaders sought to weaponize it again. But each time they tried, the machines failed unless the song was sung with gentleness. The melody refused domination. It demanded compassion. Decades later, when humanity finally looked to the stars, their ships left Earth not on roars of fire, but on harmonies of sound, a chorus that guided engines and hearts alike. The anthem they played was simple, wordless, eternal. Children aboard the vessels called it the Maid song. None remembered the name Mira. None needed to. Her gift had become humanity's inheritance. The stars answered, their distant light pulsing to the same rhythm. Somewhere in the heart of a nebula, a shape vast and luminous stirred, a dragon of light, smiling in sleep. And so the universe itself became the cradle of a single truth, that the smallest voice, born of empathy, can calm even the fiercest flame. Far from Orathan, far from Earth, Aaliyah stood one day upon the deck of her ship, gazing into a sea of color and silence. She felt it then, the hum of something vast, gentle, and familiar resonating through the void. Without thinking, she began to sing. The stars shimmered brighter as if echoing her melody. Somewhere unseen, Dalian's essence stirred once more, whispering across galaxies. "Well done, little one." The song lives on, and when the last note faded into the dark, it left no silence, only peace, eternal and human.